The NBA draft is right around the corner, and in the weeks leading up to this draft, I have not exactly been excited about it from a Sacramento Kings perspective because the Kings do not have their first round pick. But in the last week or so, we have been hearing rumors that the Kings are looking to move into the first round, possibly into the early 20s. And that news has made me very excited because right now, what do the Kings need? Well, as Kings fans, really, we need something to be excited about, and that usually comes with young players with potential. And so the Kings have the 42nd overall pick of this draft, but are looking to move into the first round. Hopefully they are able to do that. But when we're looking at who the Kings should draft and possible prospects that the Kings could be looking at, it is very difficult because we don't know where the Kings are going to be drafting. We don't know if they will trade into the first round. We also don't know what direction Scott Perry wants to take this team. We don't know who's going to be on the roster at the start of this season. This offseason is going to tell us a lot about the direction of this team, but that's probably not going to happen before the draft. I guess it could, but it probably won't happen before the draft. And so it is hard to pick out certain needs for the Kings because I don't think there's any player on this team, and I don't think this team is good enough for the Kings to be just drafting for fit. They should just draft whoever the best player is. And the interesting thing about the drafting best available versus drafting for fit is that those two things are not completely separate. As a team, what you have to do in the draft is pick the player that you think you will develop into the best player. And so right now, when you look at the young players on the Kings, you have two guys like Devin Carter and Keon Ellis, both who are two guards, who are best on the defensive end, kind of 3-and-D two guards. And so if the Kings were to draft another 6'3" defensive two guard, that may not be the best pick if you aren't going to give them minutes behind a Devin Carter or Keon Ellis or the other guards on this team. But if you think that player is the best available, then it is fine to draft that type of player, but you just need to make sure that you have a pathway for that player to be able to realize the potential that they have. There's no player on this Kings roster that is good enough to make you not draft a certain position. But Scott Perry and the front office just have to make sure that whoever they draft, they have a path towards that player getting minutes to be able to realize their potential. And so when you look at the current young players on the Kings, like I said, Devin Carter, defensive two guard, Keon Ellis, a defensive two guard, you have Keegan Murray, a two-way wing, and then you have like Isaac Jones, who's like a 4-5 athlete, and Isaiah Crawford, who's a 3-and-D wing. And so again, none of those players are good enough to stop you from drafting at those same positions. But when you're looking at the needs that the Kings have, the positions that make the most sense are a point guard, a primary ball handler, an athletic big, because the Kings have Sabonis and they have Jonas Valanciunas. Really, they need an athletic big that can maybe play alongside Sabonis or back him up and add that much needed defense and athleticism to the front court of this team. And then you can also draft a two-way wing because you can never have enough of those, and the Kings definitely do not have enough of those. And so I've picked 5 players from this upcoming draft at each of those positions, point guard, wing, big, that the Kings could be looking at. There are, of course, many more options than the ones that I am going to talk about. I also factored in whether the Kings had worked out certain players when choosing the 5 players at each position to talk about. I also tried to pick players that will be available when the Kings are drafting, but we don't know when the Kings are going to be drafting. So that was very hard. So some of these guys will likely be off the board when the Kings are drafting, both if they trade into the first round and with their second round pick. But starting off with the point guards, the first point guard is Nolan Traore. He is from France, a 6'5" guard that not too long ago was hyped up as one of the best prospects in this entire draft class. And then he kind of just went tumbling down draft boards as the season went along. I feel like he's getting kind of the Killian Hayes treatment, and that Killian Hayes was just so bad in the NBA as a French guard, and there were other French guards as well that have kind of failed. And so because of that, people are a little hesitant on Nolan Traore because he's not a great scorer. He's not a great shooter. There are some concerns about the defensive end. But the reason that I do like Nolan Traore is because two things he does really well. One, he's really fast. That fits a Kings team that should be wanting to play very fast. And two, he just knows how to run an offense. His biggest skill is his playmaking ability. He's a solid pick and roll point guard. Everything else is a bit of a work in progress, but he has size at the point guard position, which I love. He's only 19 years old. As the season went along for him, he improved his shooting, improved his scoring. It is a little bit interesting that he's an extremely fast player, but he's not an above the rim type of athletic player. But I think he's definitely a type of guy that if he is on the board, falls down into the 20s or high teens and the Kings trade into a pick that high, then I think he's definitely someone that the Kings should consider. The next point guard that I have is Jase Richardson. The Kings attended his workout recently. He's the son of Jase Richardson, went to Michigan State. He's 6'2", so not the biggest, but has a big wingspan, so plays bigger than he is. He shot the ball super efficiently last season at Michigan State, 41% from three on around 3 attempts per game, average 12 points per game. Is not a true point guard coming out, much more of a combo guard, but he has ball handling skills, could develop into a point guard because he does have good feel for the game. He can play in the pick and roll, he can get to the rim, finish there. He's the type of player where he's not exactly someone that the Kings are drafting to put him into this current roster, because with the current roster, the way it's constructed behind a Malik Monk and a Zach LaVine and a Keon Ellis and a Devin Carter, like, he doesn't really make much sense. But again, I expect big changes to this roster, and so I don't think that that's something that we should worry about too much, because Jase Richardson is a player that can light it up scoring wise, and he's just one of those players that's got that dog in him. Then we move on to a guy that's definitely more of a 3-and-D guy than a point guard, and that is Tyrese Proctor. He's like 6'5", 6'6", a little bit older at 21 years old. So this is the type of guy that Monte McNair would have picked if he was still the GM, I feel like, just because he is older, he's got a solid wingspan. He's probably not a guy that's going to be the primary ball handler and the primary playmaker. At Duke, the primary creation was left to other guys, but he is a very good movement shooter, can move off the ball very well, is good as a secondary playmaker, and I just think he has all the traits to develop into a very good prototypical 3-and-D guy. Good length and defensive skills, good shooter, can make good reads off the catch if the shot isn't there. So he's another guy who maybe doesn't fit with a Keon Ellis and a Devin Carter there. But if you're not considering that, he is a very skilled guy that I think will be a good NBA player. And he was also a guy that had a workout with the Kings. And, you know, having a workout doesn't mean too much. You see all the time guys not work out with certain teams and still get picked by them. But it is just that extra little bit of information that we know the Kings are interested in looking at him. And the same can be said for the next guy, Ryan Nembhard. Am I just adding him because of what his brother is doing in Indiana? Maybe. But if Ryan Nembhard can become even close to what Andrew Nembhard is, then he could be a very good value guy in the second round. He is on the smaller side, 6 foot, 22 years old, but at Gonzaga was a great floor general, a great playmaker, has defensive limitations because of his size. Also, his shot isn't great, but it has been improving. And if he is anything like his brother, he'll just shoot 50% from 3 in the postseason. So all you have to do is get there, and then he'll start knocking down the 3-point shots. And so with the Kings, just in need of a true point guard who is going to be a floor general, he could be an interesting guy in the second round. And then the last guard that I wanted to talk about is Alijah Martin. That's another guy that the Kings have worked out. 6'2" guard out of Florida, 23 years old. So another one on the older side, another guy who is a second rounder. And he is an energy guy. Defensive intensity, energy, athleticism, plays bigger than he is, rebounds the ball, is a super physical player, but he's an inconsistent shooter. He's not a great playmaker. And so you kind of have the two opposites in Ryan Nembhard and Alijah Martin. One is the limited defensively smaller floor general, and then the other one is the athletic, energetic effort, rebounding, physicality, not floor general point guard. But you can never have too much athleticism on a team. That was it for the guards. Now we move on to the wings. And the wings is where I'm more interested in, to be honest. I'm a little bit underwhelmed by the guards that could possibly be available for the Kings. Maybe that's just because the Kings have drafted so many guards in recent history. And to be fair, they've been pretty good at drafting guards. But with the Kings' need for athleticism on the wing, this is really where most of my interest is. And so the first wing we have is Nique Clifford out of Colorado State. He is on the older side, 23 years old, 6'6". And he is a guy who the Kings have worked out, which is interesting because he is kind of projected out of the Kings' draft range. But Clifford is kind of the plug-and-play wing that's kind of solid at everything, but doesn't have one trait that really stands out. He is a very good rebounder, a long team defender, has a little bit of on-the-ball playmaking, is a solid catch-and-shoot shooter. So I would say more of a high-floor guy who's just solid all around, but maybe doesn't have that ceiling of some of the other raw potential wings out there. But I feel like we've seen plenty of examples of guys like Nique Clifford who are older and just well-rounded players that have a lot of success in the NBA over the kind of more raw potential guys. Of course, you're probably not getting an all-star type of player out of him, but you're probably getting a solid rotational piece. The next guy we have is Collin Murray-Boyles out of South Carolina. He's a guy who I don't think will be in the Kings draft range, but just in case he is, I love this dude. He's 6'8", has a 7-foot wingspan, 20 years old, and is just a monster on the defensive end, and does it without insane athleticism. He does it with his length, and he also does it with his strength, and also his brain. The comparison that I've seen for him is Draymond Green, and that's obviously an interesting comparison because there's no one like Draymond Green. Draymond being a smaller player who's just able to guard 1 through 5 because of how well he moves, even though he's not some insane athlete, but he moves well and has that timing around the rim and the quick hands. And so if there's anybody that resembles that even a little bit, it is Collin Murray-Boyles because he can handle the ball a little bit and has some passing ability. But he isn't a shooter. He played in the post a lot offensively, but has short roll, passing ability, can bully his way to the rim, and then is just a machine on the defensive end with his super quick hands and his timing. So I think if the Kings were able to move up to draft him, I would be very excited. Then we move on to Adou Thiero out of Arkansas, another 6'7", 6'8" wing with a 7-foot wingspan, 21 years old, super strong, physical, and fast athlete. He's a guy who lives at the rim offensively as a transition beast. When he gets going downhill in a straight line in transition, he's very hard to stop. Great offensive rebounder. On the defensive end, a stocks beast, stocks and deflections. He's definitely still developing that outside shot, but if it could get there, like with many guys, if it can get there, then that would make him insanely valuable. And he also has some passing skills as well. And I don't think I mentioned, the Kings worked him out. The Kings also worked out this next guy, R.J. Luis Jr., out of St. John's, 6'8", 22 years old. He's a guy who can space the floor on catch and shoot shots, isn't a good scorer or playmaker, but he can sit out on the perimeter and is a little inconsistent, but he can knock him down. Is a very good transition finisher. Definitely more of a play finisher than an on-ball guy. Defensively, super long, physical, and active defender, which is what I'm looking for. That's what the Kings need. Same can be said for this next guy, Dink Pate, out of Mexico City. The Capitana is in the G League, 6'7", 19 years old. I believe he was the youngest player in the G League last season. And when he came in to work out for the Kings, he did his interview, and he was a very fun interview to listen to. And he described himself as a big guard. And you can definitely see he has the ability to handle the ball. but is very much a young project. Great athleticism. I think he has potential as a shooter, but definitely not there yet. But he has potential as a shooter. Not a playmaker or a shot creator, but is very good when he gets going downhill at the rim because of his athleticism, has that great transition scoring ability. One worry for him is his awareness defensively, but again, he's very young, so hopefully that's something that could come in time. He has all the physical tools, he just needs to put it together, and I think he could be a solid second round guy. Because what I'm looking for in a wing for the Kings is someone who's going to be able to play in transition, probably play above the rim, and just add that athleticism and length to the Kings defense. But now we move on to the big men, and it's interesting that none of the big men that I have had workouts with the Kings. So, a lot of the guards, a lot of the wings, the Kings did work out, but not the big men. And the big men are interesting because, right now the center position for the Kings is Sabonis and Valanciunas, two guys who are not athletic. They're just bruisers down in the paint. And so you have Isaac Jones, who can play the 4-5, who is an athletic player at 6'9", but I would like the Kings to get another athlete at the 5 position, someone who can play above the rim, someone who has length and vertical ability to be able to block shots. And so if the Kings want an athlete who can block shots and catch lobs, Joan Beringer out of France is that guy. 6'11", 18-year-old who is just a rim runner, sit in the dunker spot type of guy on the offensive end. He's not going to do anything else. He's not going to take a single jump shot. He's going to live at the rim. Needs to fill out his frame a bit because he is very young. But he can handle the ball offensively, but definitely very much a project. And I think he would be the perfect type of guy to get rid of the Monte McNair era of drafting. No more 23-year-old, 6'3", put-together guards. Nah, Scott Perry taking us somewhere else. Taking us to raw project athletes. And I think that would be a very fun route to take. Obviously a route that has plenty of risk to go with it, but it would be fun. The next guy is Rasheer Fleming out of St. Joseph's, 6'9", 21-year-old with a massive wingspan. But despite having that massive wingspan, he can space the floor, shot 39% from 3. Is not a shot creator, is not a ball handler, but can catch and shoot from the outside. Is more of a 4 than a 5, but I think he, could play the 5. And if that 3 ball translates as a guy that could play next to a guy like Domantas Sabonis, because he can be kind of that 3-and-D spacer type of player with positional versatility, defensive length, hustle guy. The next center is Ryan Kalkbrenner out of Creighton, 23 years old. Massive 7-footer with a massive wingspan. Elite shot blocking. Extremely slow. Not a guy that's going to be out on the perimeter. He's going to, play in the drop, play around the rim. And so while there's questions about that in the modern NBA, I don't think that that's a position that's completely gone away in the modern NBA. There's still a place for elite shot blockers that just sit around the rim. Of course, you want him to be able to move his feet a little bit, and especially on the offensive end. He needs to be able to catch balls and just finish over guys to exploit smaller defenses. He can do that. He can catch lobs. So it'd be interesting to see if he could translate to the NBA, but I think there's a shot. Then we have Asa Newell out of Georgia, 6'9", 6'10", 6'11 wingspan, 19 years old. He is an elite offensive rebounder and dunker. Putbacks for days. I have him in the big category, but he defends on the perimeter like a wing. And so I don't really know what his position is, but maybe that doesn't matter in today's NBA. I think there is a little bit of a worry with him on the offensive end, where he likes to play on the perimeter a little too much. He crashes for offensive rebounds, but as a screener and as an off-ball cutter, needs to get to the rim a little bit more rather than playing on the perimeter. He shot 29% from 3 on almost 3 attempts per game. So he's not an effective shooter, and maybe he could get there, but he has good touch inside, so I think he would need to live inside a little bit more than he did in college. But another one of those elite athlete guys. And then the last big man that I have is Hansen Yang, another just behemoth, 7'2", 20 years old out of China. This is a guy who I have actually seen in person. Probably the only guy that I've seen in person in this year's draft, because he came and with the Chinese national team, played at the California Classic last year. So he's a guy who loves to live in the post. And out of the post, he just likes to bully his way to the rim and then either score or pass out of it. He is a good passer out of the post. And that's where I've seen some comparisons to a guy like Alperen Şengün, but he has a long ways to go to be like Şengün. I think what I noticed from him when I was watching him in person is that when he's not able to get to the rim and bully his guy in the post right away, it just really drags out the possessions. He just kind of sits there and doesn't know what to do. It stagnates the possession for the team. And so if he's not able to go right through a guy, there's a question of how he'll make an impact offensively. So he has to catch up to the pace of the NBA, and defensively, there are definitely worries about him moving in space. But he does move better than a guy like Ryan Kalkbrenner. And so I'd be looking at him as more of a second round pick if he falls there. So that is it for the 15 guys that I had. There are plenty of other solid names, but I couldn't go through them all. So let me know who you guys want the Kings to draft, who you guys are interested in, some of the guys that maybe I didn't mention. But yeah, I'm very excited for this upcoming draft because I think it could be a busy one for the Kings on the trade market. Hopefully we don't get let down in that, but there's plenty of smoke around the Kings that they're going to be making some sort of move, and hopefully it is to move up in this draft. So anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.